Well, we've been here before, Paul, is the answer to that. So incredibly disappointed. Disappointed for some really good candidates and MPs who have lost, and very disappointed for Peter Dutton. But you saw the best of Peter Dutton a bit late.
Correct.
His concession speech last night was Dutton. I mean, I don't know Dutton all that well, to be honest, but what a class act he is. That was a class performance by Peter Dutton, for goodness sake. The guy's an absolutely quality human being, and regrettably we won't see him as Prime Minister, but he joins a long pantheon of people that would have been great Prime Ministers of this country, but that's the way the roulette wheel turns, mate.
All right, let's get into, again, keeping to nerd out on some of the numbers here. Cos, it was fairly obvious about where the result was going to be. The conversation of minority-majority was the outside expectations. Then once it becomes clear majority, and obviously there's a way past that now, was there a particular result or a seat that, as an old school party guy and now the sort of external data guy, where you went, wow, that's pretty big? Mine would be the Labor result in Queensland.
Yeah, that's right, correct. I mean, our key seats track was tracking those seats, so Leichhardt, Longman, Ford, and it was showing pretty good numbers for Labor, and I thought, look, it might be a data aberration, but we thought, no, they're our numbers, we've got to publish them. And when they fell, I thought, well, okay, geez, something's going on here that's pretty big. And it's those Queensland seats that took me by surprise. Everything else was as I expected. Menzies was going to play out like it did in Melbourne, and Deakin, and Goldstein could go back to Tim Wilson, and I think it will. And Labor was going to be okay in seats in Melbourne, which the coalition were hoping to get, because we saw a very significant swing to Labor in that state. But it was Queensland that took me by surprise in a very big way.
Yeah, I mean, certainly, again, we know that when an independent gets re-elected, get ready, they have had their feet in wet cement, they are there, all right? We saw it with Wilkie in Tasmania, Sharkey in South Australia, Katter in Queensland, and that is now the case when it comes to the re-election of all bar one of the Teals. That Bradfield number's really interesting. Obviously, if they get there, well, that's on the way towards what people predicted. If they don't, we know that that's their second and massive crack at it, and their expectation was to grow the footprint. And if the footprint does retract, either with Goldstein or the failure in Bradfield, it'll be really fascinating here. But I want to ask again a question of you, Cos, which is, we know that generally speaking, 52-48, 53-47, reality 55-45. Is that a miss, or that's the margin of error conversation?
Yeah, so we're projecting, and so is Poll Bludger projecting, that it will land on about 54.
Okay, so basically,
yeah. And so, I mean, we had it at 53, so about 1.1% out. And I think a couple of other pollsters as well were within that space as well. So that's pretty good. That's what you want.
Yeah. Well, I was just going to say is that, but also, Michael, the type of polling that I personally think is going to be more instructive for the next 3 years and probably for the future of the industry. Thank goodness for the national poll, but I don't care. I want to see a poll of 20 seats, the ones that swing and the back and forth. Because, okay, as we were talking about before the election, Michael, was it just hardcore Labor vote that was going up in hardcore Labor seats, all right? But if you can see in the things that swing what's happening, as well as marry that in with the electoral roll, you're going to get pretty damn close. Don't you think, Michael, that has to be the future of insight into the electorate?
Although it depends on how big the poll is. I mean, you see these rubbish polls occasionally where Chris Bowen, there was some poll showing that he was on 19% and his challenger was on 40%. You see these push polls, these fake polls, which are on small numbers by non-credible sources. I always take the view that in a federal seat, in the actual seat, I don't want to see a poll less than 1,000 voters in a federal seat, because that's 1%. It's not a huge number, but it can change. But I prefer to see the bigger the poll, the better. If you're seeing a seat where the poll is 100 or 150, just put it in the bin, mate. Just take no notice. But it is very hard. It's very hard to poll individual seats. Very hard.
Yeah, there's also a couple of companies I could name, and Cos would probably be happy if I did. But if you know, you know. Where you just go, okay, rightio, goodbye. Into the not even for the narrative conversation. I'm not going near any of that stuff. All right. So let's talk here as well in and around polling. Freshwater, okay? Now, they were the most generous to the coalition. They published in the Financial Review, but they were providing the private insights to the Liberal Party. James Campbell's got a story this afternoon that some of the seat polling and the seat insight into Dixon was allegedly being held back from Peter Dutton. If that's the case, well, again, political malpractice from the people who should always tell you what's going on. You don't want to be flying blind. You'll hit the cliff. But they came out and have basically, as a reputational exercise, defended themselves via the Financial Review tonight. In amongst other things, they congratulate Cos and RedBridge for getting it bang on the money, which I thought is a good thing to do. But this is what they say about the three things and the three reasons that they missed Labor's landslide. I'm going to read all three of them to you from the people behind the Freshwater organisation. If we can get those up, guys. The first quote. First, polling appears to have overestimated Labor defectors to the coalition, particularly those who voted no at the Voice referendum. Okay, just on this one point. Bob Hawke was simultaneously re-elected multiple times while losing multiple referendums. The idea that the referendum equals the result in an election, there's no overlap. But, as you can see there, number two on what they had to say here. Second, for all the noise about preference flows being different in a way that would substantially benefit the coalition performance, that outcome simply did not materialise. Now, the One Nation vote, we've got to talk about this, at some points was up around 7, 8, 9, even 10. Looks like at this stage we're sitting at about 6 and a bit. There was a little bit of junk news that was around because somebody, quickly touched a couple of things that, the preference flows were running at 90% and therefore if they're up, then the preference flows go well. That wasn't true. Third thing here, the third was the late swing. Given that all the pollsters seem to have underestimated the swing to Labor and everyone's field work would have been over days in that week, it strongly suggests, that there was a late swing among soft voters. Well, surprise, surprise. I think many last-minute undecided voters just go, who do they think's going to win? But that's part of my theory. Okay, Michael, can't help but talk about the data that's inside the room, the data that was being fed into the machine. Publicly, we saw that it was the most positive of the polling, but it also seems that the spin they were giving to the media, and I think in potentially the candidate was, oh, mate, in 15 seats, we're 50-50. We're 50-50. Where the reality was, it was 52-48, and they'd hoped the 52-48 was their way, but it wasn't.
So, mate, long experience tells me never to listen to private polling, private party polling. A senior coalition person said to me during the election, the private polling is very, very good. I said, don't take any notice of it. Oh, no, we're very confident in this, that and the other seat. And I said, have you actually seen the polling in writing? No. Any documents or any spreadsheets, anything on Zoom or anything? No. I said, so some pollsters just said it's very good and you've swallowed that and gone away. Yes. Why would they lie to us? I said, because...
Well, a lot of reasons.
If you say... A lot of reasons, but one of the reasons is that out of high-level meetings, things tend to leak out, and then they might leak to people like pests like James Campbell, who keeps writing this stuff. He's very good.
We love
columnist, by the way. Well, he's a brilliant writer, Campbell. But so you always keep the confidence up of everyone. Now, what James has written tonight is devastating if they have kept from Peter Dutton certain polling in his own seat in Brisbane, and if that's true, Dutton would have every reason to be profoundly disappointed with that. But no, I never take any notice of private polling, and donors and people that ring me and say, what do you think the private polling's saying? I always say, don't take any notice of it, just read COS or Newspoll or get a sense of a consensus of these polls and you know where the thing's going. Otherwise, what you're saying is that the private polling's right and every other poll is wrong. Well, that's just nonsense. So the private polling isn't terribly relevant, I don't think.
Correct.